Hello and welcome to the 20th episode now of the Formula E Zone podcast with your host Jack Maynard. We've been treated to another great race in Marrakesh where we saw the streak of 5 different winners from the first 5 races of the season continue, and 9 in 9 if you go back to last season. Unfortunately, no Tobias for this one. Exam revision and work at E-Formel means he probably won't be back until around the end of the season. But luckily today we have a great guest to talk to you all things Marrakesh E-Prix from the Formula E Zone news desk himself. It's William Dodds.
Hi Jack, how are you?
Yeah man, not too well. Not too bad actually, not too well. I mean, it sounds like I'm ill, well to be fair. What's going on in the earth at the moment, you know, who knows if you're well or if you're ill at the moment. So, but no, thank you so much for coming on.
No, it's a pleasure to be here.
Excellent. So, Marrakesh, I don't know if it was a stunning race. I was about to say it was an absolute stunning race. And I've mentioned this many times on the podcast that every race is like so absorbing. I think it was a good race, probably not the most thrilling that we've had. I think as it being like a normal circuit in a sense, it sort of followed procedure of a normal motor race.
Yeah, it was actually strange to you got to the end of the race until Sims had his issue right at the end, and to actually look at a Formula E race and have all 24 drivers still on the circuit was actually a bit strange. But yeah, I think as you said, it's kind of the difference, you know, how people like their motorsport. I guess it's like some people, for example, taking a Formula One example, would prefer that kind of Hockenheim, just complete madness, people spinning off all over the place. Whereas some people prefer kind of something like Silverstone, where it's more about the racing and the wheel-to-wheel action. I think this was a bit more for kind of like a purist who just wanted to see the best drivers going up against each other, and I think that's what this was, and I really enjoyed it personally. Yeah,
to be fair, it was a good race. I'm not saying it was a bad race, but for Formula E, you're treated to some crazy finishes, and you know, to be fair, we got a slightly crazy finish with the battle between Gunther and Vergne towards the end of the race, which we'll get on to. But yeah, it didn't have those frills and spills, those crashes like in Mexico when Sam Bird and Stoffel Vandoorne just crashed out, and you're like, oh my god, how did Stoffel Vandoorne and Sam Bird, two extremely experienced drivers, completely lose it? Like you don't expect it, but that seems to happen in Formula E compared to different motorsports. Obviously, the walls are much closer. But yeah, I thought it was a good race. But I think what we'll do is we'll go straight into it. We'll sort of start with the biggest talking point, which, you know, was a bit of a shock come Friday morning when we heard that Jean-Eric Vergne wouldn't be driving the car on the Friday in the practice session, and James Rossiter had to come in. And obviously, Rossiter was there for the rookie test. So, but him coming into the series for that practice session meant he couldn't take part in the rookie test, so that means I had to get Nico Lapierre. I think on a normal weekend, to be honest with you, Will, is he probably would have done FP1, but because Rossiter and they had those rookie drivers there, I think they just took those precautions and said, look, just get well, we'll need you tomorrow, we'll just chuck Rossiter in the car.
Yeah, I think that it was a bit of good fortune having the rookie there for the test, as you said, but you know, even on the Saturday of the race, he did not look well at all, and you know, I think that, you know, as well as he did in the race, he will have been disappointed, I think, to lose out in qualifying to Da Costa. You know, he's a new teammate, and he's actually putting up a really, really good fight against a double champion, and you know, with Jev being in Group 2 and Da Costa actually coming from Group 1, I think that, you know, you would expect Jev to get the better of him, considering the advantage he has. So perhaps that was his illness showing a little bit.
Yeah, I suppose. I still think it was he qualified 11th, Vergne, so it wasn't
It's still a good job.
Yeah, not too bad from Group 2, and obviously with the illness as well, probably taken a couple of attempts out of him. But I still think it was but you have to remember, he lost 45 minutes of track time. Like, that is huge. I know he's been around Marrakesh before, and I know the track hasn't really changed much. But it's a new car, different experience, different probably energy readings, different way of managing the energy for this year's car compared to last year's car, probably, with like improvements. So he only had half an hour track time in the practice 2 session in the morning. So to go in from half an hour, I think they said that he missed like six. I think their numbers were a bit odd, like 60% track time. I think Jack Nicholls and Dario Franchitti said it might be a bit less than that. But I still thought with that half-hour session to go into qualifying and at least put himself in a position to race and to position to move forward, I thought that was a great job.
And I guess that's always the tough thing about Formula E qualifying, isn't it? It's one lap. There's very little margin for error, and this was something that kind of you hear them talking about a lot. Is just like the amount of laps and preparation they put in just to execute properly when that one lap and the time around comes for that one lap. So obviously losing so much time compared to everyone else is really important and really damaging. But he did well.
No, he definitely did well. But then we've got to move on to then the championship leader at the time, Mitch Evans, because obviously Mitch, out in Group 1, won the race comfortably in Mexico a couple of weeks ago. But Formula E teams have been playing close to the wire, and Evans, they managed to miss the timing of his lap. So he crossed the line at just a tenth, basically too slow. As the checkered flag came out, the red lights came out, and he didn't start his qualifying lap. So therefore had to start at the back of the grid. And, well, to be honest with you, for the last couple of races now, and even going back into last season, we've seen teams leave it to the last minute possible to get a lap out. And I know you've got 6 minutes, it's not a lot of time, but obviously the tracks aren't that big, so you should be able to get round and at least do your warm-up lap and your 250 lap. But obviously I find it odd that teams now are just leaving it to the last second and then missing out, because it's so difficult to overtake in Formula E. I know you going from the back, but you're putting yourself in a position of danger straight away.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. Firstly, I think that you got to consider the fact that Da Costa was only just ahead of him. So obviously he wanted to give himself enough space to complete his flying lap without being kind of like stuck directly behind Da Costa. And I think you actually saw that when he left the garage, he wasn't actually as far behind Da Costa as he was when he got to the end of his lap. I think that probably played a small part in him missing the cutoff. But also, you always hear teams talk about how important it is in Formula E. It's like, you just need to kind of pick up points when you can and just try and be near the front. You're not going to be able to win every race, but it's always about just like not making mistakes. And then to make that kind of mistake and be right at the back of the grid, obviously it's a brilliant drive from him to get back towards the front. You feel like he's just missed a real opportunity on a weekend where he was clearly very quick.
Yeah, he was on fire. He was on fire in the practice sessions. Again, the Jaguar car, they've seemed to, whatever they've done from Santiago to Mexico, has really made a huge impact. Yeah. Because, he in Santiago, he was on pole, driving away.
In Santiago, he was just losing time. Towards the end of the race, he was just kind of a sitting duck in a way, and he was very lucky to stay on the podium, wasn't he?
Yeah, because he lost out to Nyck de Vries, and if it wasn't for Nyck de Vries' penalty, then he would have not been on the podium. Yeah,
so as you say, it's what they've done is really impressive, and he looks like really formidable. So it just makes that kind of mistake all the more frustrating, because you feel like even if he is starting kind of 10th or 11th as kind of Jev was, you feel like he's going to be right up at the front just because of how well he's driving and how well he's kind of tuned up in that car at the moment.
Yeah, and as I said at the beginning when we started talking, like, it is hard to overtake. Okay, Marrakesh proved to be actually quite a decent track for overtaking for Formula E. There was quite a lot of overtakes through the field. But notoriously, you'll go to places a bit like Santiago, like Diriyah, where, overtaking isn't as easy. And if you put yourself in that position to miss out, and we've seen it with DS. DS normally have quite bad qualifying in Diriyah, for example, over the last 2 seasons, and they haven't been able to work their way through as quickly as they would like, and things have had to fall into place for them to actually get those positions and move forward. So I find it odd. You've got 6 minutes. It's such a big risk to go out last man, because obviously Evans went out last man, and obviously, as you said, Da Costa was a bit ahead, but then obviously Da Costa's backed up, which has caused Evans to back up. So you're already, by going last out, within a couple of seconds, 20 seconds leeway, you're leaving yourself not a lot of time, not a lot of breathing room.
Yeah.
So, it's you go on.
So I was going to say, I think something that shows just how committed Jaguar are is then that, Evans misses the cut-off, he's starting last on the grid, and then they still leave it very much the last minute with Collado as well. So
Yeah.
it's pretty ballsy from the team, but they obviously think that it's kind of worth the gamble. But it'll be interesting to see if they're willing to leave it so close next time out with Evans, especially given the fact that he could have potentially cost himself a podium there from that mistake.
Yeah, and I suppose fortune favours the brave, but at the same time, you look like a clown when it doesn't work out for you. So as it is, you're. I'm trying to think of the saying now, but it's like, never mind. It'll come back to me at some point. But I don't know, just to leave it that late. And Evans is now he put himself in Mexico in such a championship winning position. Like he proved that he could be a man to look out for this season. He could be the dark horse, or maybe the front running horse, or maybe to make a cat joke somewhere, but I can't think of one, so we'll just move on. Too many horses, I don't know why. But anyway, I just think it was such a lot when points are important, and when you've got a car that at the moment looks to be one of the quickest on the grid, to put yourself in that position was a bit iffy. But let's move on, because Da Costa, the man that we were saying that was in front of him, managed to actually get out of Group 1 pretty well and actually make it into Super Pole. So Da Costa, obviously, him leaving it to the last minute, managed to put himself on a great lap to get into Super Pole.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was something that either Jack Nicholls or Dario Franchitti mentioned on commentary, but perhaps the effect of the groups wouldn't be as pronounced at this race. I think they said compared to some other street circuits, perhaps it wasn't the condition of the track.
Yeah, because
it
doesn't
get
better. Okay, it'll get some. Because it'll get some sand on it, because obviously it's surrounded by a desert. But and to be fair, considering track times, like it wasn't. With the day being as it was, with obviously practice being in a bit later at 9 o'clock, and then it was only like an hour till qualifying started, so the track was fairly rubbered in.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as big.
Yeah, you saw in Evans' interview as well after missing out that he said he did a 17.4, which obviously would have got him into Super Pole. So I think that would have been what him and Da Costa both into Super Pole from Group 1. So I definitely think the effect perhaps is less pronounced than it has been at other circuits. But it's really,
Nigeria, for example.
Yeah, really, really impressive from Da Costa. I actually was I didn't know how well I thought he would do following the move to Cheetah, because you looked at how kind of Jev outperformed Lotterer last season, but he's really done very well since arriving there, and it's actually really, really good for the sport, I think, to have two top drivers in a top team who kind of compete against one another.
Because they're battling, they really are battling at the moment, and it's great to see him, because Da Costa has always, from season 1, shown glimpses that he's a real deal, and even when he was in his junior career, he showed more than enough glimpses to show that he was a real deal. But when he came to Formula E, he was quick, but then he'd had an odd race where he wasn't that quick, and then he had odd seasons, like season 3 when he was at Andretti and he was partnered with Robin Freins. Like, Robin Freins beat him over the course of the season, so like he has had like a season or two where he's been quiet, but then he'll have spells where races are just amazing. But this season, I think he knows. I think BMW, he was obviously quick last season, and he knew he had a car that could challenge for the championship, but for one reason or not, BMW sort of faded away. Tech Cheetah have been the team to beat now for the past 2 seasons, and it could even be still the team to beat this season, because the car, especially from the performance in the race, which we'll get onto, was mind-blowing, and that's been pretty consistent so far this season. If it wasn't for the bad qualifyings that Da Costa may have had and Vergne's had this season, Tech Cheetah could be flying in this championship. They could be walking and saying that they're still the big dogs.
I mean, on race pace they look incredible, and it seems like no matter where those two start on the grid, they're always, I feel like it's like 3 races now when it's ended up with those two next to one another and some sort of kind of battle directly between the two teammates. So that's really fantastic to see. But as you say, BMW looked to have some. Ironically, the team that Costa left looked to have some serious qualifying pace. Gunter, and it seems that one of Gunter and Sims are always kind of up there in Superpole from the BMW team, but they perhaps don't quite have the same race pace. Whereas that Techeetah, obviously, you're saying this after Da Costa's just gone and put it on pole, but its race pace looks really formidable.
Yeah, and the thing is, he left BMW not because it was slow. Like, Da Costa knew that that BMW were going to be strong this season. He knew they were going to be a threat, and he knew that they had the potential to win races. He knew that. He was going to Techeetah simply because he knew that they are the best team. They're the team that BMW are trying to beat, so why just join the best team and go and win a championship? Because I know it's really early to say, and I know there's so many people that would, shoot me down for saying that, but he could be, him and Evans, I think, at the moment, are the two standout drivers that could be fighting for this season's championship. I think Vergne's, obviously, you've got to put him in there. But in terms of a battle that we might see from two different teams, it's looking like a Costa-Evans battle if they can just get qualifying right.
Yeah, I think that it's difficult because obviously, on the one hand, you've got inter-team battle, kind of taking points off one another between Vergne and Da Costa, but then also you've got Evans, who doesn't seem to have any support from his teammate. That means that Techeetah are going to have the advantage of potentially using team orders and kind of working together in order to beat out Evans, whereas Evans just doesn't have that same kind of teammate support with Collado, because he's just like, sadly, he's just like pretty far off the pace.
Yeah, I think that's obviously, we've discussed this before, with obviously Collado being a rookie driver coming in, and we've said it, when will teams feel like, if the driver, look at Verline, look at people like Nyck de Vries who have come into the series and hit the ground running and straight at the front, and, can you afford to have a driver and give him a season to sort of bed himself in, like Collado, like they normally do, as I alluded to in the last podcast. So I think, though, Jaguar's advantage is that they will throw all their resources at Evans. They will try and give Evans every sort of bit of advantage, every sort of software update that they can bring to the car, try and make it faster. They'll give it straight to Evans because, to test out first and see if it works. Because if it's quicker, then he'll go quicker. So there could be a slight advantage for that. But obviously on track, you've got, the two Techeetahs can work their way past them. But as we saw in Mexico, they can hinder each other. So you team orders, especially when you've got two drivers fighting for a championship, it doesn't always go to plan.
No, absolutely not. And I feel like if Collado was, maybe not title contender, but more kind of like battling around for the bottom end of the points, then maybe that would be a more of an advantage for Evans. I just get the feeling that, Collado, speaking on TV afterwards, he said, qualifying's been my issue, but he did all right, didn't he? I think he qualified in about 12th.
Yeah.
And then he said, but race pace has been where I've been strong, and therefore he looked quite confident. And then just to watch him almost just go nowhere, and then Evans, just by being at the back, just to go straight past him, I think it just showed the real discrepancy in level between the two at the moment. And I think Jaguar would really like to see Collado up his level just to help out Evans.
Yeah, I think, Collado had a good start to the race. He managed to pull off some good moves. I think he got himself up to P8, but then that was sort of the highest it sort of went, and it sort of went backwards as the leading, the likes of Evans and de Vries then started to come to find their way through as they did. So sort of just to round up quali then, because Da Costa, as we've alluded to, he was quick in Group 1, got himself into Super Pole, and then put it on pole. And even though he was the last runner of Super Pole, the first runner to go out, so everyone else had technically a cleaner track before him. He was still able to put it on pole. Max Gunther in the BMW was second for BMW, obviously. And then Andre Lotterer, I think this man has to have a shout out because Porsche, we don't really know how quick Porsche is, but I think Porsche is quick because obviously Neil Yarny is really struggling, but Andre Lotterer, time and time again, it's just getting that Porsche up there. Sadly, that Porsche doesn't have the race pace.
Yeah.
But it seems like that has a good quality car as well.
Yeah, I think Johnny is a similar situation to Collado or kind of Felipe Massa as well, in that it makes it just difficult to judge kind of the outright quality of that Porsche because he's so far off. But no, Lotterer has been super impressive since he's moved over, and yeah, that looks definitely to be a kind of quick car in qualifying. I think another interesting one is De Vries making it to Superpole despite having a little tap on the side of the wall.
Yeah.
Which was quite impressive. I know De Vries I think he's someone we're going to talk about later on, but I've been impressed with him actually. He definitely doesn't have the kind of craft and knowledge of Formula E that someone like Van Dorn does, but he looks quick and he looks a really good addition to the series.
And he's bedded in, like he's bedded in, and we've talked about those drivers who, like your Collados, your Neil Yarnies, Brendan Hartleys, who have come into the series and it hasn't just clicked straight away. And for Nyck de Vries, obviously F2 champion, but as I said, those, Neil Yarny, James Collado, Brendan Hartley ain't no slouch.
Yeah.
Like, you've got some former Formula One, you've got World Endurance champion there. It's like, there's a good list there. So De Vries is really bedded in well, and he qualified fourth. Eduardo Mortara doing great again for Venturi in fifth, and Sebastian Buemi for Nissan in sixth. I think for Nissan, just a brief touch before we go into the race and talk about that. Buemi, to be fair, I think he's doing a good job. I think that Nissan is quick, but it's just a couple of seconds off the pace, really. Oh, I say a couple of seconds, a couple of tenths off the pace. But you can really see it in the race trim more than quali, because he seems to be able Buemi to get the car up there now that he's in a decent qualifying group.
Yeah, I think
but it just doesn't go anywhere in the race.
Yeah, we used to, I guess, Nissan being up there with Cheetah, with BMW, with Jaguar, with, I guess, Audi, but it looks like Audi and Nissan are just a step behind the top teams this season. And as you mentioned, yeah, Buemi, he did well to kind of hold on, but you could kind of see those quicker drivers behind him just kind of coming through in Evans, and he looked like he was really struggling to kind of hold on to Mortara, who's been really impressive as well. Yeah, it's a shame because I guess Buemi's obviously got a podium and a fourth this season, so these are by no means bad results. And Roland's been super consistent, kind of always putting it in the points. But yeah, you're right in the sense that he just doesn't quite seem to have that race trim over kind of the whole race. He doesn't seem to quite have the speed.
Because Nissan were known last season for being quick qualifiers.
Yeah,
they
really
were known
quick.
for it. They didn't have the race pace. So I don't know what's happened this season, because they've seemed to lose or have lost that qualifying pace to be up there. And they've also, the race pace from last season doesn't seem to have improved at all. So I think it's a bit of head scratching in Nissan.
I think one thing they have got in their favour is they've got two very good drivers who seem to be able to bring the most out of the car. They by no means have had one of the better cars this year, but they've still kind of managed to pull out consistent results, and that's a lot more than can be said of some of the other teams. So that's something to their credit, and hopefully, if they can get better as the season goes along, provided we get a season, I think that those two drivers will be able to drag them up a bit again.
I like that. But before we just move on, because you brought up Audi as well in that sort of battle with Nissan, and obviously De Grassi's been doing he's been doing the Grassi things.
Yeah,
but,
he's just in De Grassi.
But what I mean by doing the Grassi things is that he's doing great comeback drives, because the Audi
just
is
not there.
nowhere.
And you can see that with how much Daniel Abt is struggling. This isn't rookie. This is a very seasoned Formula E driver, a race winner, and yet he's nowhere. So it just, for one, it
And
shows
even
the
De
quality.
Grassi in qualifying's nowhere.
Yeah, De Grassi's, but it just shows the experience and the quality of De Grassi that he can. Yeah, it doesn't matter where he starts. It doesn't matter kind of where his car is. He can always get that back and be there or thereabouts. They're clearly struggling for speed. Um, Again, yeah, there's a team that with two experienced drivers and a champion in De Grassi, but they need to kind of work out what's going on because they are getting left behind by BMW, Techeetah, Jaguar, and Envision Virgin, I guess. Although they struggled as well.
Yeah, and you have to remember. Yeah, they did struggle, but I would say Envision Virgin are quicker than Audi, and they've got the Audi powertrain.
Yeah.
So I think the rookie test, and I know it's the only in-season test that we have this season for Formula E, but Audi were probably one of those teams that needed to learn something the most out of all 12 teams on the grid.
Yeah.
But moving into the race then,
it's
so
always difficult to tell with the test, isn't it? But those
yeah,
times
it's
from
true.
Cassidy were really impressive.
So yeah, it's, as I said, and plus times are always difficult from testing because it's a testing program. You never
you
really
know what they're being asked to do.
what. Yeah, exactly. So you can't read too much into it. Obviously, they were running at some 250 kilowatt laps to produce those lap times, but but it's still like, how many did you do? When did you do it? When was the track a bit more rubbered in when you did it? So you can't really read too much into it. But it was still, I think it was a productive test, but for all the teams. But I felt really that Audi needed to get something out of that test in order to move forward and sort of revitalize their season.
Yeah.
So then moving into the race, it was, to be fair, quite a clean start. And the Costa, he made a great start, and Gunther came out flying as well. And those two, at the early stages of the race, they seemed to just completely, they had a good couple of seconds gap.
Yeah, really, really impressive from Costa from the outset. And I know he kind of got drawn back in by Gunther, and obviously kind of, it's difficult to say because what was weird that he obviously let him past, but also he kind of very deliberately stopped him from passing just before that. So I'm not quite sure what the thought process was there. But those two looked quick all race, and that Techeetah, as we've mentioned, has excellent race pace. So yeah, no, it was an excellent start, and I thought that I guess Da Costa's kind of had a few kind of being like bashed around a bit in the midfield. He's had a couple of incidents looking to overtake. So I think he looked really keen to just like get out in front and kind of like dictate the race on his own terms yesterday.
Yeah. So, I suppose, as I put it, it was a game of chess. I think it was the best way to describe the race, because energy management in Marrakesh, I remember talking to Robin Franz and quite a few drivers last season, and they were talking about races that were tough on energy, and Monaco, they said, even though the track being so short, was actually a race where it was actually quite tough on energy. But when I was to speak, they said, it was nowhere near as tough as Marrakesh. And you could tell how tough Marrakesh's energy management was during the race, because obviously there was a lot of lifting, coasting, which then provided that amount of overtakes that we saw in the race. But you saw that the energy levels and the battery levels were dropping quite significantly, and I suppose when towards the middle of the race, that chess move that Da Costa made of, I'm just gonna let him pass, and they talked about it, and then lift off earlier, but then use that slipstream to keep going at a decent speed. But then obviously the more you coast, the more you can regen, and that saved his energy, but then allowed him to then later on use the attack mode, to his second attack mode, to then undercut Gunther, pass him, and then he knew he had the energy to sort of maintain his pace for the remainder of the race. So, game of cat and mouse, game of chess, whatever you prefer, but I definitely think Marrakesh has turned into one of those races.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really kind of clever, but also courageous move from Da Costa to do that, because we've seen that when Gunther gets out ahead, he can really he's already won a race in a very short kind of period in Formula E, and obviously that was at the expense of Da Costa. So I think it was brave of him, but he obviously made the right decision. It allowed him to preserve energy, and you saw the way that obviously, although Gunther obviously timed it quite well in the end, he ended up falling behind Verne. So obviously, just doing that really paid dividends for Da Costa, and he ended up winning quite comfortably, even though at the time it was kind of like, oh, is this the right move? Is this a bit of a risk? But yeah, it really came up trumps, and it'd be interesting to see how perhaps in other kind of high energy consumption races, drivers potentially look at that as a strategy.
Yeah, because I think what he did, Da Costa, which was quite clever, because Verne at the time, I know we're jumping in, but Verne was behind him further, who had done a great race, and we'll talk about that race in a moment. But he wasn't far behind. But then when Da Costa went to pass Gunther, sorry, you know, Verne was basically behind Gunther, and then they started battling, which just allowed Da Costa to completely manage his own race. He probably wasn't driving that fast, but because those two were battling behind him, it just allowed him to go off and just control and dominate his own race, because the others were squabbling behind him. So and that allowed him to eventually go on to win the race, as everyone knows. But one person, and before we go back and circle back towards the end of the race, I want to talk about Nyck de Vries, because obviously you mentioned that we were going to talk about him a bit earlier, because he was having a great race. Obviously qualified fourth, was running in, I think it was third, fourth at the time, and again, a technical infringement with too much regen. So basically what the car had done was the power usage that he was using at 200 kilowatts, he used more regen than he was supposed to, basically. Not his fault, he's just pressing on a paddle. It's just a system error. Now, for Nyck de Vries, we mentioned it a bit earlier, where he also had a power spike in Santiago, another technical thing that Nyck de Vries could not manage, or could do nothing about to avoid, and that cost him a podium in Santiago, because that got him a 5-second time penalty. This infringement cost him a drive-through. It completely destroyed his race. Came out basically 23rd, I think only just ahead of Mar maybe at the time, and it ruined his race. And again, De Vries, to be fair to him, has been super consistent this season and has had a fantastic, start to his rookie career in Formula E. And I suppose some could say that was expected, him being an F2 champion, but at the same time, we've seen how hard it is for drivers to adapt into Formula E. So I just feel for the lad, because I feel like, he could be... Again, I don't think that Mercedes is the quickest car, but consistency is so key in Formula E, and I've said it time and time again that consistency could win you the championship, not having the fastest car and not winning all the races.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of what Van Dorn was looking to do early on, but then he was just nowhere on Saturday, and obviously had that incident in Mexico. But otherwise, yeah, he just by kind of racking up those point scoring finishes every week, you can actually get yourself pretty high up. But unfortunately for De Vries, these things that are kind of coming through no fault of his own really are just scuppering him a little bit. Obviously, what happened in Mexico was his fault, but otherwise, as you say, he's looked really strong, and it's a shame to see these kind of technical issues, and he's falling foul of those. Because it's a shame, because I think that he looks like someone who could be really good and exciting to watch in those kind of battles at the sharp end of the course.
Yeah, and I don't think Mexico's too much of his fault, because it was a software glitch failure that he had, which caused the car not to stop. So even then, he's fine. Okay, he wasn't as quick in Mexico, but he was still fifth, sixth. Like he was running at a decent position, and to completely just all wheels lock up and just go straight into the wall and not slow down. Very similar to Apps. I don't think it was ever confirmed that it was a fan boost issue, that it was exactly the same as Daniel App's issue that he had in practice, but it was very similar. Like he didn't just lock up, the car just completely died on him in a sense, in terms of software glitch. But it's again just another thing a bit out of his control.
Yeah,
that's cost him.
I guess the thing is, like, obviously Mercedes has kind of been almost like kind of shadowing HWA last season, and it's kind of taken a lot from that team. So they're not kind of entirely new. Do you think these are just kind
Yeah,
of
that's
these
true.
kind of growing pains of a new team coming
Yeah.
into the sport?
I, well, to be fair, it's their first proper. I suppose, you know, they didn't. There was a Venturi powertrain. So this is at the same time. It's still their
Yeah,
first powertrain that they've built. Obviously, they've learned a lot. It's amazing that, to think that Venturi was their powertrain, and then now Venturi using a Mercedes powertrain. But obviously, it makes sense. And for Venturi, it's been fantastic. Because their pace has dramatically improved. So Mercedes can tell straight away, and I think that's quite worrying for other teams is how quick Mercedes have built a solid powertrain in a season with learning from Venturi, I suppose, and then for doing what they've done. And obviously, I know they've been a dominant era in terms of in Formula One, and I'm not saying that they're going to become the next dominant thing in Formula E, but they've started well, and they've built a package that's quite it's got some gremlins, but over time and over the season, they'll sort those gremlins out, as like Jaguar did, and they'll become stronger. And I don't think it'll be too long until we see Mercedes battling at the front, maybe next season. But I think they've built themselves a real solid foundation. And if it wasn't for these issues that Van Dorn and de Vries are having, they'd be right up there in terms of the team's championship and in terms of the drivers' championship.
oh yeah, I mean absolutely. If Van Dorn was leading the championship, going into Mexico, so obviously the bulk of those points came at Diriyah, where they were clearly very strong, and they haven't kind of been that strong since. But for De Vries and Van Dorn to be kind of making regular appearances in Superpole, and for them to kind of be challenging up at the front, it's all it takes is, as you say, for them to kind of like iron out some of those issues that they're having with their powertrain, and make sure that that's kind of not such an issue on such a regular basis. And you wouldn't be surprised to see them nab a few more podiums and even a win this season.
Yeah, it's definitely doable. Formula E is so crazy that you can't rule out a Mercedes victory. You can't probably. I was going to say the same for Porsche, but I think I think Porsche are a little bit further behind.
Yeah.
But Lotterer is doing great in terms of qualifying. But I think Mexico proved, sadly, that the race pace isn't there, and even a little bit in Marrakesh that the race pace wasn't there, which is a bit of a shame. So I think Mercedes are a bit ahead of Porsche.
Yeah, although it does help to have the kind of, I guess, the two drivers up there at the front. So if one's not having a great day, the other one can kind of like take on the mantle,
Take on the role for the points, which Porsche don't have.
And also, I guess, like, how much good kind of feedback can they be getting from Gianni, because he's just not competing, in the same league as Lotterer.
Yeah, which is a shame. But one person which we alluded to earlier in the race, we have to talk about now, is Jean-Eric Vergne, because obviously we said that he qualified in 11th, and then all of a sudden he was in that third position when we were talking about the battle with Gunther and the Costa. What a race! Like, he came through. You wouldn't have thought he was ill. You wouldn't have thought that he was as ill as he looked. He just came through the field, managed his race perfectly, pulled off some stunning overtakes, and legitimately got himself up to third. Used the attack mode to undercut the likes of Lotterer and Mortara to get himself up into fourth, and then to get him up into third. Sorry, passing Lotterer for third. So just a fantastic performance.
Yeah, he is just a real high quality operator in Formula E. As we mentioned, not very well, and you even saw him coming on the podium at the end, not wanting to run. He really did not look 100%. But it was a brilliant race. He really feels like he's mastered kind of the strategy, and he's one of those people who you look at, even kind of in Diriyah, coming from a drive-through penalty and starting at the back to get points. You look at New York last season when he kind of had a crash and he's still coming through for points. He's just someone you can never rule out in any one race. I can't remember who it was on, but he pulled an absolutely beautiful overtake down the inside on Saturday, which was just showed all his kind of racecraft, but also his kind of managed aggression, and the way he defends as well was excellent. I thought it was very impressive from Gunther to have the patience to sit behind him, trust his team that Verne will run out of energy if you just wait and you kind of make sure that you save and keep behind him and don't do anything silly. And I thought that was really impressive. But nonetheless, it was a brilliant race from Verne, and coming from 11th to 3rd, even though he could have had a second had he managed his energy slightly better, there kind of no slight on him. It was a fantastic performance.
Yeah, and talking about the energy management, obviously coming through the field and pulling off those overtakes, it uses energy.
Yeah.
Like, overtaking uses energy. Like, you have to brake a bit later, you have to maybe not, lift off as earlier, so that's still using energy.
That's what surprised me so much about Evans, is that you look at Evans and he pulled off so many overtakes, but he still seemed to have more energy than everyone else at the end. It was I don't know how he was doing it.
Yeah, it was just... it was such a tough race on energy, Marrakesh. Like, you really saw it, and the drivers will tell you just how tough it is. And to do what he did, and obviously for Verne, it sort of just was maybe, I don't know if it was one too many or one fight too many, because I suppose the fight with Gunther, it lasted a long time. Whereas maybe when we talk about Evans in a minute, like maybe his battles didn't take as long for whatever reason.
And he was going up against weaker cars as well. Yeah, that was him going up against a really informed Gunther in one of the better cars on the circuit. And you saw Sims as well. He didn't qualify well. Till he had his issue, he came through the field. So that BMW was clearly strong on race pace. So yeah, I think that considering where Gunther started and then you consider where Jev started, for him to hold him off really right up until the end was a really impressive job, considering that he had to come through the field. Only when he'd almost fully run out of energy could he actually finish the overtake.
And I suppose for Verne, it had to be done, even though he was ill. He couldn't, with the way the Costa has been so far this season, you need to get as many points or not lose as many points as possible to him. Because when you gain points against the Costa, it might not be a large gain. It might be the 7 points, it might be 2 points, it might be 3 points, depending on where they finish.
And when Jev had such a bad start to the season as well, he can't afford he can't afford to miss a race. And in a way, it's weird because obviously Da Costa won, but this was actually kind of the race where Jev kind of showed us all again just how good he is and why he's a two-time champion.
Exactly. So you're looking at the race and thought, wow, if Jev can do that ill and not in any sort of normal state in a sense. I know they say adrenaline takes over, but at the same time, if he was well, what could he have done? And yeah, it's just amazing. I think it's a really good comeback drive from Verne. I think if you told him Friday night you're going to finish 3rd, I think he would have taken your left hand.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And said, so I think it was brilliant. But I suppose the man that we've got to talk now, as you mentioned, Mitch Evans. Horrible qualifying, 24th. You've got it all to do, championship leader. Go out there and do something. And boy, did he. He came from 24th, not just to finish in a mere 10th or 9th place, pick up a point or two. He came back and finished in 6th, taking 8 championship points. Now that, we talk about drivers of the day, and you could have had many in this E-Prix. You could have had Da Costa, Verne, but Evans, how do you not give him driver of the day?
It was the annoying thing. The only reason that I would say this is because obviously, us watching the Formula E feed is we didn't actually get to see that much of him when you're watching the race first time, which is super annoying. But he pulled off. I think I know there are a couple of kind of attack mode strategy moves, but there was a good kind of 10, 12 overtakes in there. He wasn't just he wasn't just kind of doing it all by strategy. He was just taking people over. And you saw in his interview after qualifying, he just said, I'm furious, basically. And then you see straight from the beginning of the race, you watch him just kind of take, I think, two or three cars from pretty much from the start, and he just looked kind of like he meant business the whole time. He's in such a good place in that car, and he looks so hooked up. He's completely dominant last time out, and you know, it's lucky for his rivals that he was starting at the back because he could have been a real challenger for a win had he not been. But it shows how much he's improving and how good he's becoming. That you stick him at the back of the grid and he's still coming for the high point paying finishes. So yeah, it's super impressive. And to be honest, I just want a situation when we can see kind of he looks like he's kind of on that level with this Da Costa and Jev at the moment. He looks like he's kind of that level of elite by his current form. And I just really want to see a battle between the two the cheaters and him and maybe Gunter or Sims as well because he's really showing some impressive form.
Yeah, he is at one with that car. It's like, he's driving it as you stole it, something like that, like as if you stole it, because he's on rails at the moment with that car. It's a joy to watch, and I've Evans has always been that quick driver, and he sort of reminded you of that Daniel Ricciardo type figure. Not in the sort of paddock way, he's always that smiley and he's that bubbly. He is quite a bubbly guy, and he's a nice guy to talk to. But with Daniel Ricciardo's Formula One career, Mitch Evans sort of had a very similar Formula E career in terms of it was close but no cigars sometimes. Obviously Daniel Ricciardo managed to get it working in Formula One and he got some race wins with Red Bull, but there was obviously so many times for Daniel Ricciardo where the luck wasn't in it, or he just got third, or he just got pipped by someone else, or it just didn't work out for something. And Mitch Evans has sort of had that over the last couple of seasons, and now you've got to say that it's his moment.
Yeah, obviously last season, I thought that he was one of the outstanding drivers aside from Jev. And obviously he's actually kind of, I guess, lost his spot on the season podium thanks to that incident kind of in the final race in New York. But he had a great comeback drive in the first race there as well to kind of even give himself a chance. But he as you say, he looks like perhaps he was the nearly man, but this year is kind of when he finally takes matters into his own hands. And he's obviously got the equipment below him now that he feels absolutely confident in. And I just want to see him kind of taking it to those two cheaters, because it's just going to be a fantastic battle.
I agree. So the top five then for the race, it was Da Costa who won the race, Gunther in second, Vergne third, Buemi fourth, and Eduardo Mortara proving that Mercedes powertrain is pretty good in fifth eventually. So what I want to talk to you about very quickly before we go, well, we've got a bit of time left actually, is who is the main people that we think could win races this season, because we've talked about Da Costa, Vergne and Evans as our three main winners, and you've got Gunther there as well. And I think now that we're coming to the point of the season where our leading bunch, the people that we expect to win, are starting to show. I was just thinking, are you expecting... I know it's a random thing to say in terms of... because Formula E can be so crazy. And you're like, Jack, how on earth are you saying that there's only like 3 or 4 people that can win races in Formula E? Because anyone can win a race. True, I know that. But we've got to look at paper at the same time and think, well, statistically... At the moment, sadly, I know Sims won, but I can't see... Sims's form for me needs to improve. For me, at this precise moment, the only people I see winning races for the rest of the season are between Da Costa, Vergne, Evans, and possibly Gunther.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Sims. He seems to kind of be like one session on, one session off. Sometimes he qualifies really well. Like he had it hooked up in Diriyah, but then he kind of came 8th in the race, in the first race at least. And then, in Mexico, he didn't qualify very well, but then he comes through to about 5th. Obviously, that was kind of slightly assisted by the fact that literally everyone else crashed. But, he doesn't seem to be able to kind of put a weekend together since Diriyah, and I think part of that would be obviously, he ended last season as perhaps just hanging onto a seat, and then Da Costa leaves the team, and he thinks perhaps this is my chance, and then he comes in and obviously gets the two first poles. But now Gunter looks like he perhaps is, and I fully expected Gunter to be this good. He was really impressive last season, and I'm glad to see him in a top team because he's definitely a quality driver. But I think that Sims is not. He's not quite as good as Gunther, and I think that if there is going to be a BMW driver challenging for wins, it's probably going to be him. I think the other person, obviously, is that you can never rule out Sam Bird because he knows how to win races in Formula E. He's shown that over 6 seasons now. But as you say,
I'd have to agree. I forgot about Sam Bird. Well, I'd say I forgot about Sam Bird.
As we probably know, the Virgin Racing car just doesn't quite look like it's up there with those other three teams that we've mentioned.
It's definitely quick. It's definitely a quick car, and to be honest with you, it could have won a race this season already. But at the same time, it's just for whatever reason they just haven't hooked up a weekend. They need to hook up a weekend, Virgin, because they are quick. They're a team that I'd expect to be fighting for podiums when they get it right. For example, Mexico, Bird should have finished on the podium, crashed out. Frines should have finished top 5, easy, but was taken out with the De Vries incident.
Yeah, Frines.
Mexico.
Sorry, Frines is a weird one because I really kind of last season really rated him, but he doesn't seem to quite be able to match Bird at the moment.
Yeah, Frines is quick. Like, he's a quick driver, and I think it's hard to, as I said, it's really hard for us to judge drivers, but from what we can see, it's like a consistency thing with Frines.
He's definitely one of the better drivers, considering looking at how some of the others have struggled. He's definitely one of the better ones, and he's just one of those people who seems to be always involved in these super weird incidents. Getting taken out by De Vries when it's with a fan boost error. Last season in
spinning
Bern,
in Santiago.
Last season in Bern when he kind of got stuck at the end of that enormous pile up. He's definitely a quick driver, but as you said, I don't think he's not got the same kind of racecraft as Bird, and there's a reason that Bird's kind of won every season that he's been in Formula E, and Frines is just not quite there. If I had to say an outsider, I think Mortara is probably the only other one. That Venturi's look quick every week, and obviously if it's going to be one of them, it's going to be Mortara rather than Massa. Because he's looked really consistent. I can't see, sadly. He's someone who maybe could luck into a win. Just be there or thereabout and kind of pinch one. But
like the Hong Kong race he won.
Just to
fell into his hands after the Lotterer and Bird incident.
Yeah, he's always he's had kind of like a fourth and a fifth. So you feel like maybe if there's a one weekend where some of the top teams don't quite hook it up and there's an incident, he could be the one to be the beneficiary. But
I'd agree.
But otherwise, I think weirdly enough, for a season where we've had 5 individual winners and what you said 9 in a row. I think it's going to come to an end soon. I think there are only kind of 4, maybe 5 with Sam Bird drivers that can win.
I'm just trying to think. Vergne hasn't won yet, has he?
He hasn't won this season, no.
He hasn't won this season, so he might win.
But I guess he won.
Maybe he's due a win.
He won.
So he might make it 6 from 6, 10 from 10.
No, because he won towards the end of last season.
Yeah.
It would be 6 from 6.
He hasn't won this season.
Yeah.
So, as I said, if he was to win in Rome, for example, or wherever the next race is, which I suppose brings us on nicely to the next topic that I suppose the whole world is talking about at the moment, and it is that dreaded word coronavirus. It's probably a bit like tyres at the moment when you talk about motorsport. But it's obviously it's a massively serious issue, and obviously it's affecting tons of people, and obviously Italy at the moment is obviously really badly affected by it. Number of cases, number of deaths are going up. I think at the time of recording this, it's 52 deaths that have been recorded by Italy due to coronavirus. Obviously, we're due to go into Rome now. We are a month away from race day in Rome. So it's not long. Formula E have got to make a decision whether or not we race in Rome. I think flights are starting to be cancelled going into Italy, so it's shaky times now for Formula E because it's not just Rome either. Because obviously South Korea as well. We're going to Seoul in May, and cases are increasing there. You go to Jakarta, in Indonesia, they had the floods, and they were calling for the race to be postponed for the floods because, parts of Jakarta were underwater, and now cases for coronavirus are going up there as well. So Formula E are in a pickle here because potentially the next 3 rounds of the championship could all get postponed.
Yeah, it's obviously, we could end up in a situation where we only have Paris, Berlin, New York, and London left, and for fans of Formula E, that would obviously be a huge shame. Obviously, if it is an issue of spreading the disease, and if it's putting the spectators, teams, the drivers, media, anyone in danger, or it's putting just people in that country in danger by spreading the disease further, obviously you have to put their safety as the number one priority. It's just it's a real shame on pretty much every level, because this has been as much as it's kind of, you watch Formula E is like renowned for its entertainment, but just watching every race so far this season, it's just really, really good quality racing and really, really fun to watch. And it'd just be a real shame to not have more of that. We've got a really tight championship battle. We've got some really fantastic circuits and fantastic locations to go to. And it'd be a real shame to miss more of it. But unfortunately, if it is a matter of safety, there's only one decision you can really make.
No, and it's true. It's just this. We're very much in a wait and see process in terms of, waiting on Formula E's word, waiting on daily news content of seeing how the disease is spreading. So, fingers crossed for everyone. I think fingers crossed for everyone that the coronavirus is sort of now begins to halt a little bit, and numbers increased cases start to drop. And I think that would be great news for everyone, because that means we're getting on top of it, which will be fantastic. But yeah, it leaves Formula E in a sticky situation, because obviously if it was, it's going to be a big gap between races. But I suppose when you're talking about everyone's health and safety, it's probably not the biggest end of the world, because there will always be more Formula E races, and people sadly only have one life.
Yeah,
but I suppose
it's not the only motorsport either. You've got MotoGP and Formula One are in a similar situation, already cancelling races.
Serie A,
yeah,
in Italy for
Six
the football
Nations
being cancelled. You got the Olympics coming up in Japan. Like, that's a huge sporting event, the Olympics. If that was to get cancelled, that's a massive blow for for Japan, because millions are spent organising an event like the Olympics, and then to lose it through something like this, obviously it's horrible on that sense, because obviously the country's put so much money and so much resources into it, and all of that's gone.
Yeah, it's going to take a huge toll on the sporting calendar, motorsport and otherwise. But as I say, it's just for you, you're kind of talking off mic beforehand, thinking about the logistics of getting to Rome, and we don't even know if it's going to be on. So it's a real tricky situation, but hopefully, you say we kind of see the number of cases going down, and don't see too much disruption. But at the moment, it looks like we could be losing kind of a large chunk of what would otherwise have been a fantastic Formula E season.
Yeah, and obviously, just it's Formula E have obviously done really well. The Seoul event, in terms of going through the stadium, getting Jakarta done was a last-minute deal, and it's sort of everyone was looking forward to these events, and obviously for them to be cancelled is a bit of a shame. But I suppose they will be on the calendar next season if they are postponed or cancelled in any way. But Will, I think I've really enjoyed this podcast. I think I think Tobias will be proud while he's studying at the moment for his dissertation. I think he'll be like, "Yeah, boys, we did him proud."
Well, unfortunately, I never experienced that kind of feeling of having to study a dissertation because I actually didn't do one. But I feel sorry for him, and I was happy to step in.
No, brilliant. Right. Thank you so much for listening at home. Please remember to like the podcast on YouTube or any of the podcast apps that you're listening to and subscribe. It helps us out massively. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you very soon.